North Korea needed cash and fast. You see, they'd been sanctioned like no other country. With every single export being blocked, no country trading with them, and being shunned by the global economy, their country was now starving, and the outlook was very bleak. So running out of options, Kim-Jong-Un needed to find some money fast, so he decided to attempt the biggest bank heist in history. But he obviously wasn't going to do it all by himself. Instead, he turned to his personal army of cybercriminals, the Lazarus Group. For 10 years, the Lazarus Group have terrorized financial institutions across the world in a series of brutal cyber attacks. Although they've largely kept their identities a mystery, their origins can be traced back to North Korea's top secret cyber criminal program, also known as the 414 Liaison Office. Now, it's not really known how they first gained access to the Bangladesh bank's systems, but there are a couple of ways they could have got in. The first was a suspicious email sent out to Bangladesh bank employees a year prior. In January 2015, a seemingly innocuous job application from a man called Rasal Alam popped up in some employees' inboxes. It included a message about his credentials and invited them to download a document with a CV attached. But inside that document, an invader was lurking, and once it was in the system, it got straight to work, metastasizing itself inside of the network. But just as it gained complete control of the bank's systems, it suddenly stopped. It wasn't time yet. The virus needed to lay dormant until the perfect opportunity, and that wouldn't come for another year. In fact, there's evidence that this was one point of intrusion, but there's also the possibility that it was an inside job. Investigators have long suspected that someone at the bank had to be involved, as only someone with intimate knowledge of the bank's security measures could have known how to pull off what happened next. And as we'll learn later on, the Lazarus Group had agents in other banks. However, other than a few dismissals, nobody at the Bangladesh Central Bank has been punished for the intrusion. So the hackers lay dormant within the bank's network for nearly a year. But by January 29, 2016, the virus was on the move again. This time it tried to get from the bank's network into the SWIFT system. Now, for those who don't know, SWIFT is a program used by banks to send money securely across the world. All ATMs rely on SWIFT, as this records all global transactions across banking networks. It will create digital receipts and add them to the record, whilst also printing out a paper copy of each large transaction. At first, SWIFT rejected the hackers' attempts to log in. It kept finding problems with their credentials and permissions, but after at least 4 failed attempts, they finally made it in and hastily covered their tracks, and it was only after the attack was over that investigators found evidence of these intrusions. Then a few days after they got into SWIFT, the Lazarus Group was ready to put their plan into action. All they needed to do was make the transaction request and hope. But there was a reason the Lazarus Group had risked being discovered for nearly a year. They were waiting for the stars to align, and eventually they found their perfect moment, with the hack beginning at 8 PM on Thursday, the 4th of February 2016, just after business closed at the Bangladesh bank. Suddenly, 35 fraudulent multi-million-dollar transactions flooded out of the bank. Made to look legit by the hackers' infiltration of the SWIFT system, they also made sure that the Bangladesh bank wouldn't discover the transactions until it was too late. They did this by wiping the logs and sabotaging the printer to delay the physical failsafe. However, it was still early in the day in New York, where the money was actually held and the transactions were processed, so this gave plenty of time for the Federal Reserve to send the money out into the world. The next day was the beginning of the Bangladeshi weekend, meaning nobody would really be around to notice what just happened. Then the day after that, on the Saturday, only a skeleton crew came in to oversee what was usually a quiet day, and it was that afternoon when they got the printers working again that they discovered the true magnitude of what had just happened. In total, the Lazarus Group had taken $951 million from their account. But Bangladesh's central bank was about to have their first bit of good luck. But before we continue, I want to tell you about our video sponsor. So picture the scene. You've just got yourself a brand new phone and you're looking for the best mobile game to play. Enter Raid Shadow Legends with awesome visuals, loads of powerful champions, challenging PvE bosses, and tactical PvP content. But wait, there's more. Raid Shadow Legends is actually a hit mobile game played by more than 80 million people worldwide, and it's completely free to play, so there's no harm in downloading and trying it out. You can either take it easy by casually playing, or go competitive and try to be one of the best in the game. So what is Raid? Well, here's my 4 favorite things about the game. Regular updates and content. There's always new stuff coming to Raid. The arena in Raid is just the perfect way to test your strength against other players. Then not to mention the index. The index from Raid allows you to see any champion in the game, along with what their skills are, which gives you the perfect ability to plan effective counter strategies. And lastly, the Demon Lord, a clan boss who is a massive challenge to play against, who earns you powerful daily resources like shards and gems. Raid's 4th anniversary is finally here, and there's a ton to get excited about. I'm talking about dedicated offers, free gifts, promo codes, events, and a brand new fusion event, where you guys can get your hands on an anniversary-themed legendary champion. You'll also be able to take a trip down memory lane with a recap video on your stats in Raid. And so with all of this exciting stuff and more coming to Raid, if you haven't started playing yet, then what are you waiting for? Use my link in the description below, or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses. We're talking epic raid champion Kellen the Shrike, and other useful things like energy refills, magic potions, and XP brews. And since it's Raid's birthday, the gifts just keep on coming. All new and existing players can get a bunch of free birthday gifts. Once you're in game after clicking the links, just enter promo code 4YearsRaid to get your hands on 4 legendary skill tomes, plus a bunch of other useful stuff, available for both new and existing players. When the Federal Reserve received the transaction requests, most of them were made out to the RCBC Bank on Jupiter Street, Manila. Now this is a completely legitimate bank, so it shouldn't have raised any flags. However, there's also a sanctioned Iranian shipping vessel that's also called Jupiter. So the Fed system saw the word Jupiter, flagged the transactions and blocked them. So only 5 of the 35 transactions got through because of just a complete coincidence in the system. And so by choosing this one bank over hundreds of others in Manila alone, cost the hackers around $850 million. But the hackers still had 100 million left, and the clock was ticking. By February 9th, officials at the bank in Bangladesh had seen the flurry of messages from the Federal Reserve. Panicked, they sent stop orders to the rest of the transactions. But for most of them, it was too late. One of the 5 that did get through though, was sent along to a charity called the Shalika Foundation. They were meant to pass on this $20 million donation further down the line, but it never got there in the first place. And despite the intricate planning and sophistication that went into the heist, the Lazarus group made a stupid mistake, and it would cost them big time. As on the transfer request, the hackers had misspelled foundation on the transfer order, writing it instead as foundation. An eagle-eyed bank employee spotted the error and stopped the transaction just in time to freeze the funds. So the hackers had just lost another $20 million, and it was all just because of a simple typo. However, they still left $80 million that was unaccounted for, and getting further out of reach every minute that was still missing. But the bank manager didn't let anyone else know, besides the security consultants he brought in to investigate. In fact, the whole scandal was kept under wraps during the most vital hours of the investigation. When the security consultants did finally arrive, all they could do was trace the path that the money took. So this gave the hackers all the time they needed to withdraw their funds and get them out as soon as possible. And it was only on the 9th of February, 5 full days after the attack, that Bangladesh sent freeze requests to the Jupiter Street Bank. But despite the freeze request received a few hours earlier, the Jupiter Street bank manager authorized the withdrawal of all the funds from the suspect accounts. And because of this, she was later convicted for her part in the crime. Without her approval of the withdrawal, a large portion of this money would have been reclaimed. However, the Lazarus group had lost hundreds of millions in potential takings, but they did still have $81 million of stolen money within their reach. However, if they kept it in the legitimate financial world forever, it would eventually be traced and seized by authorities. So they needed to come up with a plan to take it out and make it look clean. And they found that the best way to do this was through gambling. Casinos, or at least the kind that the Lazarus group went to, aren't very scrupulous about where you get your money. The Soler and Midas Casino in Manila were happy to take $50 million of the Lazarus group's money, all without any questions being asked. And once they were in the casino's private rooms, the Lazarus group stacked a card table with accomplices, and by controlling the game, the hackers could get nearly all of their money back as clean casino winnings, ready to be shipped back straight to North Korea. At the time, the Philippines had very relaxed money laundering laws for casinos, meaning it was impossible for the Bangladeshi authorities to get their money back without a long and drawn-out legal battle. But by then, it would be gone forever and lost in the Hermit Kingdom. Although some of the money was still recovered after a casino manager brought it to authorities, but most of the stolen money made its way out of the casinos and back into the Lazarus group's control. From there, it was then sent to Macau, a Chinese exclave known as a gambling hotspot and for its links to North Korea. Investigations later found that 2 of the companies which had booked the rooms used to launder the money were all based in Macau. Even after all the losses that the Lazarus group took, they still eventually walked away with around $65 million. For one of the largest heists in history, there really haven't been many leads. The only actual conviction was the Jupiter Street bank manager, who okayed these original transactions. Grasping at straws, officials painted her as one of the masterminds of the plot. And whilst the evidence does clearly implicate her as a vital part of the chain of events, it's really unlikely that she was running the whole thing, especially considering she was left right in the firing line once the crime was uncovered. Instead, there's a few other suspects that are much more likely to have played a leading role in the crime. The first is a man called Park In-yok, or at least that's one of his aliases. His true name is unknown, but he's notorious for his connections to the Lazarus group. The media and FBI painted him as a major player, but the truth's a little bit more complicated than this. The Lazarus group's true nature is that it's a vital arm of the North Korean government, but then this begs the question, how does North Korea find these hackers in the first place? These aren't hackers from Western countries, and yet North Koreans don't even have access to the internet. So how are they able to hire the world's best hackers? Well, North Korea has a strategy in place. First, they hunt for any North Korean boys with an aptitude for mathematics, those who score the highest on incredibly competitive tests then get enrolled in an intensive training course. These boys, some as young as 12 years old, get taught the ins and outs of advanced computer hacking, where they are religiously trained for years, as North Korea turns them into a very new kind of elite soldier. And then once the training is complete, North Korea sends them abroad to places like the Chinese city of Dalian, where they will work day and night with dozens of the most intelligent hackers in the world on various cybercrimes and schemes, all under the close watch of North Korean security. Park Han-hyuk was one of these soldiers, and he's the best lead we have to the Lazarus Group. You see, Park has been implicated in a series of North Korean cybercrimes, and the FBI categorizes him as a highly dangerous criminal. And whilst Park is likely a very key player in all the crimes that Lazarus commits, he's still subject to the total control of his regime, which is why it's very unlikely that he saw even a tiny fraction of the percentage of millions that he's helped steal. In fact, becoming part of the Lazarus Group isn't at all glamorous. Witnesses have told stories of dozens of young men crammed into rooms, working at both legitimate and illegitimate coding. However, make no mistake, this life is still infinitely better than what's waiting for them back home. Simple freedoms like access to the outside internet and information are far more than what most North Korean people can even dream of. And this is what makes these smart young men so willing to commit crimes for North Korea, as it's a much better alternative to what's waiting for them at home. But make no mistake, the Lazarus Group isn't just involved in heists. These hackers like Park, who are part of the Lazarus Group, have also worked on other infamous schemes, such as the Sony Pictures hack just a few years earlier. Now, for those who don't know, in response to Sony's releasing of The Interview, a movie that loves and features the assassination of Kim Jong-Un, North Korea retaliated with serious consequences. And that's why a few days after this movie was released, Sony Pictures lost control of their network and vital information like CEO salaries and unannounced upcoming movies that were leaked online. All the movie theatre chains were then threatened to not showing the movie, and if they did, North Korea threatened a nationwide terrorist attack, leading to the cancellation of nearly all of the movie's showings. And it didn't just stop there. The Lazarus Group ruined the lives of all those who worked on The Interview. Everyone's personal information, all their private texts, anything and everything about these people was leaked online, which showed that the Lazarus Group, the arm of North Korea, was able to silence all political critics from thousands of miles away. And this isn't the first incident of this. In 2013, they also attacked a wide range of South Korean banks, TV networks, and the tech giant LG. In a coordinated operation, internet banking services and ATMs were shut down, as well as the TV networks' websites and computer networks, bringing South Korea to a standstill for days whilst the government worked to put things back together. But aside from political reasons, why is North Korea investing so much into cybercrime anyway? Well, it becomes clear once you go into the numbers and you realize just how successful the Lazarus Group has been. You see, the Lazarus Group has been involved in countless crimes which have all pulled in millions of dollars. For example, they looted another 12 million from a bank in Ecuador, and then another million from a bank in Vietnam in 2015. A year after the Bangladesh heist, the Lazarus Group were implicated in the infamous WannaCry cyber attack. A similar virus to the one which stole from the Bangladesh bank shut down hospitals and other infrastructure across the world. In a classic ransomware scheme, the virus encrypted key system files and documents, offering to unencrypt them for a fee. But some of the most lucrative Lazarus Group hacks have involved crypto. In 2017, Lazarus Group viruses and intrusions stole tens of millions of dollars worth of cryptocurrencies from South Korean exchanges and customers, which is why in total, the Lazarus Group has stolen an estimated $1.2 billion in digital assets for the North Korean regime. In the future, the Lazarus Group and other cyber criminal organizations will only get more dangerous. Despite how isolated the people of North Korea are, the regime itself is at the cutting edge of digital espionage and disruption. Deepfakes can lead to some terrifying possibilities. Social engineering and convincing the victim that you're trustworthy plays a crucial role in their cyber attacks, and the point of intrusion needs to come from something which seems trustworthy. So soon the Lazarus Group and others will be able to fake up high officials' voices in phone calls or manipulate video footage to fool their victims. A deepfake phone call to a bank employee might be enough to convince them to move some money from one account to another. I mean, the possibilities are just endless, and considering how lucrative it's been so far, North Korea really has no reason to stop. It's one of their main sources of income. Cybercrimes aren't the only ones that North Korea is willing to get involved with either. Along with the Lazarus Group, North Korea also has shady organizations dedicated to more traditional crimes. Along with selling drugs like meth, one of their largest is a room called Room 39, which is likely the source of so-called super dollars. Now, super dollars are as close to perfection when it comes to counterfeit money. In fact, you need a microscope to spot the flaws in the notes. North Korea also pours in millions of dollars through their illegal drug trade. A former North Korean intelligence agent has claimed that he helped run a methamphetamine laboratory, whilst a former North Korean diplomat has mentioned a state-sponsored drug trafficking program which both exported drugs and sold them domestically, with the dirty proceeds then going straight into Kim Jong-Un's personal fortune. When you compare these figures to North Korea's total GDP, you can see why Kim Jong-Un and his sinister cabal have been so eager to fund the Lazarus Group. In 2016, the country's entire legal earnings only added up to around $28 billion. making North Korea one of the poorest countries in the world. And much of their legal earnings only comes from raw resources exported to China at low prices, usually from slave labor camps. And they can't really export to anyone else but China because nobody will trade with them due to their global sanctions and their reputation. And so when you put this figure up against the profits of the Lazarus Group and other criminal enterprises, it represents a major industry for North Korea, and even more so than other countries, as North Korea is in desperate need of quick money. International sanctions make it very difficult for the elites of North Korea to get their hands on foreign currency, which is the only way they can trade with the rest of the world on the black market. Nukes aren't cheap, and neither is designing and making them yourself, so North Korea's plans to expand their nuclear arsenal is a never-ending money hole. And so they need to turn to these illicit sources of money because the country itself isn't designed to make any useful products. Because North Korea's society is completely centered around controlling the people and keeping the regime secure with total communism. Intentional mass starvation is one of the government's most potent weapons. And so when you have to worry about where your lunch is coming from, or how you're going to keep your family alive on dandelions and bugs, you don't have time or the energy to even think about rebellion. But as well as not providing food, the North Korean government also actively restricts its people from finding it for themselves. Harsh punishments are handed out for things like venturing out to hunt animals or gathering plants. Only the army is kept well fed, as they are the ones keeping the regime's control. But of course, it's not just food that's taken away. North Korea's infrastructure is intentionally neglected. Clean water, medical supplies, and electricity are virtually impossible to get. And you can see this particular repression most clearly from outer space. South Korea is thousands of times brighter than North Korea from space. And it's not like the North Korean government can't afford these things, they're just not willing to provide them. They don't want their population well fed and educated, otherwise the Kim family would completely dissolve. And that's why the Kim dynasty regularly refuses foreign aid for their all too common humanitarian crisis. Famine after famine, starvation and disease, and yet no foreign aid can come through, as accepting it would run counter to their goal of keeping the people impoverished and easily controlled. Society has also been shaped by the regime to suit its needs, right down to the basic building blocks of language and relationships. Defectors from North Korea have described how things like stress, depression, and other negative terms don't even have words associated with them. Even the entire North Korean calendar is different, as these things aren't compatible with the totalitarian ideology of the state. And it's cruel measures like this, combined with fences, walls, armed guards, and landmines, are what keeps North Koreans trapped inside of the country. And this is the whole point of the Lazarus Group. The Lazarus Group works to uphold the most corrupt and evil regime on the planet. But when you consider the other options of life for the hackers that make up the Lazarus Group, you can't really blame these people. Without their job as a weapon of the regime, they would just become another of North Korea's millions of victims.